Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Scope. American Photographic Artists is a not-for-profit association whose mission it is to educate, promote, advocate, and build community with members of the photographic industry. It's created by photographers for photographers from emerging to seasoned professionals.
Hey everyone, welcome. Thank you to our members for your continued support. And if you're not a member and you consider joining APA, we have great advantage membership programs here at APA. So please reach out and visit our web for more info.
Scope is a production of the APA Diversity Committee, which was founded in 2020 and is charged with clearing a path to success for its members who are traditionally marginalized BIPOC, LGBTQIA+ at APA National and its chapters.
Scope is a recurring series of conversations around diversity topics in the photo industry in the interest of raising awareness, education, and targeting racism and homo and transphobia in our industry. My name is Edwin Vargas, and I'm a Latinx photographer and educator from Costa Rica. My main focus has been in lifting voices of underrepresented communities, and I am a founding member of the Diversity Committee, and also a proud member of the San Francisco chapter here at APA.
And I'm Ken Clickinger. I use he, him, and I live and work in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm co-owner of Capital Arts Studios and also a founding member of the APA Diversity Committee.
We are so pleased today to welcome to Scope a couple of the folks who are behind of the recent Cure the Lens survey. Amy Scott. Amy Scott is an advertising photographer who specializes in visual storytelling around food, people, and agriculture. They are based in Texas. And Kate Warren is an advertising, lifestyle, and editorial photographer focused on intimacy, identity, and memory. She is a native Vermonter, currently based in New York.
Thank you both so much for joining us today as our guest hosts. We're so excited to have you. Amy and Kate will be moderating the conversation today with our very special guests, who we will leave to them to introduce.
So without further ado, we'll turn it over to you, Amy and Kate. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ken and Edwin, for rolling out the red carpet for all of us. We're super excited to be partnering with APA on this event. Like they said, I am Amy. I am one of the Queer the Lens co-founders and excited to be here with Kate Warren, who's another one of our co-founders. Queer the Lens is an LGBTQIA community that supports queer creators through connection and advocacy. And that includes right now events, partnerships, and our community survey. So you'll be hearing more about that later, but I'll let Kate take it from here.
Thank you so much for having us, APA. I'm Kate Warren. We are so excited to be here with our incredible panelists coming to you from across the country, whose experiences range from a wide variety of both identities and professional experiences. I would love to have folks introduce themselves with their labels of choice. We recognize that labels are only as meaningful as they are to the individual using them. So I would love for folks to go around, let us know a little bit about themselves, their pronouns, and labels they choose to use if they choose to use labels. Coyote, why don't we start with you?
안녕하세요. Hello, my name is Coyote. I go by he, they pronouns. I'm a two-spirit transgender artist out in Tongva territory, also known as Los Angeles. And I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii. I grew up in the Kingdom of Hawaii, and I'm a mixed artist that is Native, white, and Korean.
Awesome, thank you so much. Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Rosenstein. I go by she and her. I am a photographer here and director in Los Angeles, California, and most of my work these days are musicians, celebrity, advertising, editorial. I do a lot of that good stuff. Yeah, I love to document, and it's freeing for me. So that's what I'll start with.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Maun?
Hi everyone, I'm Mon. I'm a Chinese born and raised New York based photographer and artist. I guess most of my personal work are kind of about identity, about queerness, just kind of really wanting to see the in-between spaces of these constructs. Yeah, and I'm just really excited to be here. I guess we will share more as we go on. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much. So with that, now that y'all have met our amazing panelists, we would like to give them each a few minutes to share just a quick little bite of their work so you can get a sense of how they express themselves photographically. Amy, would you like to share your screen? Yeah, that looks great. Awesome. There we are. There we are again. Here they are. Okay, we already did a little bit of walkthrough, so you can see each panelist's website and social media handle as we introduce them. But we also will be providing their contact information at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions or would like to reach out to them, you can do so then. Go ahead, next slide. And you can bring us straight into their work. All right, Coyote, take it away.
Hi. A little bit about my photo practice specifically is everything that I'm really passionate about creating has to do with like what I like to call kind of like fine arts dad photographs. Like when your dad's like, hey, everyone, like, let's get together and like make this little keepsake. I kind of make a lot of images surrounding like my chosen family, my loved ones, different lovers and friends and relatives, and making images that usually tend to go into like either gallery shows or will go into my own like personal practice. I'm really into bookmaking, and I'll do commissions here and there for more editorial and commercial work. However, the images I'm really passionate about are doing these like images of my like loved ones. So this image here is the photograph after my wedding with my wife. My wife and I are both like trans people of color, and so thinking about documenting moments of ease between both of us. This image is called Morning After. It was photographed in 2020. I think a lot about the way that like light and natural light is able to capture like these like moments that are gentle and keep these as like memories and moments. I like to think of my photographs that I make with my wife specifically as things that in the future that I can like look back on and like relive these moments with her. And also thinking about showcasing trans love, as that's not something I really got to grow up to view. You can go to the next image. This here is with my sweetie who I'm actually seeing really soon and excited about. Is a lover of mine that I've been seeing for the past 2 years. We visit each other from time to time, and this image is called Aftercare with thinking about the ways that we do these physical caretaking and acts to tend to one another And this image specifically was in my show All Kin is Bloodkin, that looks at chosen family and queer kinship in diaspora. And that image was shown at the gallery show in El Pony Space in Honolulu, Hawaii, in my hometown for my solo show, which was the most beautiful moment I've had in seeing my extended family and Pacific diaspora all in one physical space. Can go to the next slide. This image here, this one is called Weekly Ritual. It's a photograph I made at the end of last year of my wife and I doing our hormone shots together, which is a very timely photo because today is our hormone shot we had to do together. So a good reminder. Just thinking about like ways that I can show reciprocity, thinking of like not only images that I've made in the past of my friends taking care of me after top surgery, but ways that I'm able to caretake for others. You can go to the next one. Oh, there's one more image that I had that emailed, but I didn't realize it's on the presentation. But yeah, that's a good summary of a few of like my favorite works, and a body of work for All Kin is Bloodkin that I'm kind of expanding upon and constantly growing, as it's something that I take in the moment, or things that I'll like go into spaces with others. And something really important to my practice is body reclamation, and especially in relationship to land. Thinking of growing up with so many photographers like Ansel Adams, or people that were like white photographers taking images of indigenous land and commodifying that and making so much money off of it. Thinking about what are ways that I'm able to reclaim photo practice and my relationship with land, which the other image was this one that is on my social media. It was most recently posted, called Our Bodies as Hills. And it's myself with a loved one where we're like naked and embracing each other on these hills. And that person's also a Native American trans person. So thinking about ways that we're able to have moments of ease and joy out in land that has been violently taken from us. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it's important in thinking about photo as a medium that creates access for artists that historically have not had that access. And thinking about to the like history of daguerreotypes, and I'm constantly challenging my work. What does it mean to rebuild agency with myself and my loved ones?
That's so beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing, Coyote. I'm really looking forward to diving into some of the themes that you talked about in the discussion portion of the panel. So I really appreciate you sharing. Go ahead. All right, Mon, you're up.
Hi, everyone. First, thank you, Coyote, for sharing your work. I've been just watching your work from afar for a long time, and what you just said really resonate with me, kind of focusing on queer love and queer joy. How do we live in this world with ease? I personally came to the States in 2012, and being here makes me realize I am really in the intersection of all these different identities. So a lot of my personal work do arise from my own questions navigating in this completely different world from where I grew up. So a lot of the projects are kind of exploring the in-between spaces, because I feel like there's like a lack of nuanced storytelling when we're talking about these identity related projects. Can you go to the next slide? So I want to share a couple of my personal projects. This one called Here We Are is one of my first longer term projects, dealing with my own coming out process. And in this process, I also interviewed other people and did a lot of research. So it's a multimedia website that later got shown in different places. But it really starts from my urge to share my own story and to kind of share myself with my parents. I attached some screenshots. So I started off from making a coming out video letter to my parents, and then shared it with my parents through FaceTime, and recorded their response at the same time. So it was like very raw and unfiltered. This project really reminded me how powerful personal narratives are. And a lot of times as marginalized community, we were constantly told to be small and to shrink ourselves. But yeah, in this project, just like documenting a real moment in life and share with the world make me feel very empowered. And also later getting connected with a lot of people from all over the world telling me that they felt seen. That made me feel very affirmed. Yeah, because of time, I'm not gonna talk about the specifics, but if you're interested, feel free to check out the website and watch the whole process. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. And the second project I did, like a longer term project I did, was about Asian adoptees who grew up in white families. At that time, I had been in the States for about 6-7 years. And every time I go home to China, people are like, oh, you're too American. But if I'm in the States, people are always like, oh, you're a foreigner. So again, like being kind of stuck in two spaces I considered home, and not feeling super accepted by both places. I was wondering who were also thinking about similar issues. So I decided to reach out to Asian adoptees who grew up in white families, because I want to talk about kind of familiar, like family, talk about the nuanced things about race and gender, like in a loving situation. I think a lot of times we do want to love each other, but we were not educated in the ways that we can love and in the ways that we can communicate our differences and how we can care for each other. So this project, I interviewed eight adoptees with different gender identities and ranging from 9 years old to 56 years old. So each of them shared their own perspective as adoptees living in the States. So, and also for each one of them, I made portraits and still life images of objects that represented their adoptee identity, and also did audio interview sharing their perspectives. Can you go to the next one? And the other project that it's just an ongoing longer term project, is also focused on my queer families, and really wanting people to look at the mundane beauty of our everyday life. Again, I feel like these days there are more queer narratives in the mainstream media, but a lot of times it's pretty extreme. It's either us very glamoring, going to parties, or like us dying. There are like not enough stories filling the space in between of us just like being, existing, doing these everyday things like everyone else. So I wanted to create an archive of these images of queer folks just living. So I've been photographing friends and loved ones in their comfortable space, in our like daily hangouts. Just create these containers where we can look back and also see us resting and being beautiful, just as we are. Can you go to the next slide? And the last project I want to share today is called Playground Radio. I started this project during pandemic, when I was feeling quite down and quite confused about the world around me. I'm sure a lot of folks share similar feelings. And this is my first time to really turn the lens back to myself. I usually don't do self-portraits. So again, a plot to Coyote, like I know you do a lot of self-portraits, and I found it really hard to turn the lens back to myself. But again, like I noticed how often I use my lens to tell like tender stories of other people, but do I also give that tenderness to myself? I'm questioning that. So these images are kind of an opportunity for me to look at myself in a loving way, to give myself more compassion and share what's on my mind and document emotions that I was going through. So here you can see self-portraits and also some like doodles that talked about like things that was going on in my mind, like a lot of questions I was thinking about, like what is your program of pleasure and what are we experiencing in this time of chaos? So yeah, these are the main longer term projects I've been working on. So excited to talk to you more about everything. I think that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jen Rosenstein, would you like to walk us through some of your work?
Sure, be great. Thank you to the ones before me. That was really, really great to hear everybody's work. We're all so different, so the contrast and diversity is amazing. Okay, so here I go. My work, oh, this wasn't the first one I wanted to show you. I have them numbered. Damn, can you show the first? Yes, thank you so much. There's a reason why. So this portrait I did was done back in 2007 while I was a student at Art Center College of Design. And the reason why this image is so important to me and my career was because I did a whole photo series with about 300 plus portraits from all over the country of the trans community. And the reason why that's important to me is it was a time in my life where I had questions about the transgender community, not about if I was trans or not, but I was curious and I wanted, I had questions, you know, and I was so invited into this community in Los Angeles by this really great guy, friend of mine named Jake, who ran the Gay and Lesbian Center in West Hollywood for a long time. And he opened his doors to me and introduced me to so many people in the community. And I was invited in and trusted. And I heard so many wonderful stories that resonated with me, that it wasn't just about physical changes, but emotional, mental, and stability and what that means. And I was able to like get all these stories from all over the country and document and just be invited in. And it was such a special thing. So the reason why, another reason why I'm sharing this image was this image, it was a personal project for myself. And I was told not to do it. I was told not to do this project because I would be pigeonholed into shooting this community and that's it. And I didn't see it that way. I saw it as something really personal to myself, being a queer person in a community, that I needed to like dig deeper and find out who I am, find out the community around me. I had questions. I didn't even know back then if I even knew a trans person. It wasn't in mainstream media, and I wanted to dive into it for myself, and I was told not to do it. And what has happened since then is that one of my first big commercial jobs was based off of this image. And so for me, that told me that I have to go with what I believe in and what my vision is and the stories I want to tell. And if it resonates with me, it doesn't matter if somebody thinks I should do it or not. I have to stay true to myself. And you can go on. You can go on, thanks. I'm probably going to talk too much. For example, the comedian actress Tiffany Haddish, you know, you could tell in all my work based on the first image that I showed you, there's a lot of that in it. So for me, it's very personal. My portraiture work is very personal. I tend to get hired by if it's the artists themselves. So Tiffany hired me personally to shadow her. She had a bat mitzvah. She had me go on tour with her. She had me document her everyday life based on that personal relationships, and that it's not just about picking up the camera and taking a photo. It's about the personal space and being trusted. And so I took this photo of her in a hotel room before she took a stage. And it was nice to photograph someone who's always about fashion and the biggest fashion photographer and, you know, glam and makeup. And with me, it's just very personal. It's just, this is who I am. And I'm very lucky to have these experiences with people that trust me. You can move on. This is John Batiste. And I was invited by him and his management team to shadow him the last several months in New York and here in Los Angeles. And this image was early in the morning in New York City. And it was one of those moments where I walked into his hotel room and I was like, let's just play, man. Let's just have a good time. And he was like, yeah, let's just fucking have a great time, you know? And like we did. And there's another image, it's not a part of this group, but something that I always, as a photographer, as the others would also say, it is about light, it's about mood, it's about feeling. You don't always need to have a 20-person crew to document and to tell a story in light. It's about seeing and feeling and connecting with the subject, for me anyways. And with John, we've created such a great body of work of just being two human beings connecting and documenting. You can go into the next one. And then this is Toast Nabasi. This was shot in my home studio here in Los Angeles. This is for a cover of a magazine. This is actually not the image that was for the cover. Another image for a cover was a very commercial-based photograph. This was us having fun. And a lot of the images I'm showing you guys today are images based on me having fun. Like, great, we got that image for the magazine, we got the image for the label, we got the image for the commercial, we got the image to make the money, we got that, you know what I mean? And it's always like, let's have fun now, you know? And this is one of those images. He doesn't have his guitar. Tosin is considered to be one of the most legendary guitarists of our time. And most every image he has a guitar in his hand. And this one is just me letting him and him letting me capture who he is right now, you know, and this moment and being free. And I think that's the most important thing I can say about my work is I try to let my subjects be themselves and not what the client always wants, because those moments in between is what's like, that's like the money shot. Those are the timeless moments. All right, you could move on. This is Justin Woman. He Netflix for a magic show, comedy show, and he's been wanting to work with me for a while. And we recently shot this in a studio in LA for his tour and his new Netflix special. And it's the same thing with this. It's just us being creative and having fun and, you know, pushing like what people would expect and making it into our own. You know, like we played off of a lot of old magician photographs from the 70s, 60s and the 70s and kind of modernized it. But if you can tell in all my work, it's always been about that connection I have with the subject. It's always this look, it's always this eyes, it's always, it's not always about the glam, you know, it's always about the connection. That's what I go for. I go for the connection. You can go to the next one. If there's a next one.
I think we just did 5 for everybody. Thank you so much for sharing, Jen.
Thanks.
So thank you all so much for giving us that really fun overview of all of your work. I would love now to jump in to a little bit of a group discussion. I have some questions, and so for folks watching at home, if you have questions, you should definitely feel free to pop those in the Q&A or chat functions. We have folks monitoring that, and we will be opening this up for a question and answer at the end of the session as well. So to start off, I think all of you really touched on the importance of joy and playfulness and tenderness as being sort of intrinsic to your practices, both toward yourselves and toward the other folks that you're photographing. So I would love to hear you speak more about how those themes connect to your identities as queer folks, and then how you use those to sort of queer the medium of photography, which does have such a, does have such a colonialist and like cishet male past. I can call on people if you don't want to jump in. Everyone's so polite. Coyote, do you want to start?
I feel like a lot of just like queering the practice of photography is like, just as photographers, how can we work on having our practice be less extractive? And I think that a lot of that really comes into relationship building. My first like long-term job as a photographer was working in a nightlife event in New York. And it was like a queer kink space and fetish party. And when working in that space, like a lot of it was people that like I had relationships outside of the club with, like people that I like would go and meet and get coffee with, people that would tell me like, oh, I really love the fit that I planned for tonight and really want documentation of it. And like, could you get a photo of this for me? So it really is like, how do we release ownership over images? Like not in the sense of like having, say, especially when we're looking at social media or things where sometimes we like lose full rights over our images in cyberspace, but more in terms of like, how do we recognize that it's not I'm taking a photo of someone, but I'm making a photo with someone. And I think it takes away this relationship of photography as here's my subject and here's this person that's like the sitter, as we like some of us that went to photo school like have learned of like the sitter relationship. And how do we see it more as this is an ongoing collaboration, even if it's a short-lived collaboration, or even if it's someone that's in your studio space for a album cover, at the same time, that still is something that they have so much of their vision and so much of their body and so much of their just like spirit like in. So how do we not only honor that, but have a dialogue around what, sharing that ownership and like power over that image means?
That's really beautiful. Does anybody want to respond to that?
Yeah, I really resonate with what Kyle just said. I agree, like camera photography has such a almost violent history. And so I think as photographers, how can we educate ourselves of these power dynamics and shift that is so important. It's in my everyday practice, even from the way we use the language, like, yeah, shifting from taking, from shooting to like making, collaborating, filming, documenting, just like using, even from the language level, shifting from using these violent language. And I also, in terms of the power thing, like I super relate. Whenever I have a chance, sometimes when I'm doing editorial work or photographing for a newspaper, I might not have the chance to talk to the people I photograph beforehand. But when I get a chance, I always have a meeting with them before even we meet in person and photograph. We talked about like, how do you want to be represented? What are the elements that we can bring to the photo shoot that can make you feel more comfortable? And I also, I did like learn from the photojournalism practice. So there's the saying of like, be the fly on the wall, which I don't really agree with anymore. I think us being in presence with other people, it always change the power dynamic. So instead of saying like, oh, we can be invisible, like let's just be clear, like we are here, and how can we use this dynamic that we are together, like to create magical moments that you might not do with yourself. And also I think like being queer and being like migrants, I know the struggle. I know how it feels when we don't feel represented. So I think bringing that personal experience of really wanting to make sure that people who are in front of camera have the shared power of dictating, like deciding what photos to go into it, is quite important in my practice. Yeah, just I think our embodied experience as queer folks are super valuable. And yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I appreciate you bringing in the ideas of how you create a space of enthusiastic ongoing consent into the photo space, right? Jen, how do you feel like that's a part of your practice when you are sometimes brought into like traditionally, you know, masculine rock and roll kind of spaces that may have a more hetero dynamic? Like, how has that been for you?
Hilarious, because it's a thing. It definitely is a thing. And thank you for you guys' what you've had to say. No, I mean, it's definitely for me, I tend to get hired to be that fly on the wall. That's what they call it. They do call it fly on the wall, which for me means I am in this person's space. They're consenting me to be in their space. It's a mutual, it's just not about a camera and taking a photo. Kind of like touched on before, it is a, you guys, I have to have good chemistry with my subject, and I'm not in their way, they're not in my way. We're just on the flow together. To hit on what you just talked about, in my experience being, you know, I identify as a woman in this space, right? Queer, gay, lesbian woman in the space. And I will say, I think Amy and I spoke about this on the phone last week. You know, it is, my wife and I always say, like, it's such a boys club. You know, like the business that my, and I don't know what it's like for the other participants, what they work in, but in my specific path, it's very bro, you know, it's very, that's all I can really say to Boys Club. And I've had to really push through that and to stand my own ground as a woman in this business. And I'm sure there's some attendees in here that I see that are fellow women identified in this business. And I'm sure they can identify with that it's very, you have to be thick skinned, you know what I mean? You have to be a little bit of a thick skin, I think, any part of this business, but thick skin and move forward and have a voice. And there's this one example, I won't name any names, I won't name drop anything, but I was photographing this band, and this other photographer happened to be in the space I was in, because he was part of that borough camp. And he literally, I was doing a portrait and he literally pushed me out of the way. He pushed me because I was getting a shot. He like literally pushed me out of the way. And I was so stunned by that, because that's not the kind of people I surround myself with and work with. And there was this other person there, a pretty famous, well-known photographer, and he said to me, don't ever let him ever push you again. He's known to doing that with women. Like, he'll just be like, get out of my way, this is mine, you know? And that was such a learning. I'm still hanging on to that resentment of like, I am like, you don't do that to anybody, man or women, but you don't do that. But in my experience, that's just like a metaphor of what it's been like. I've had jobs and I've lost jobs because the label has called me and literally has said like, he wants his bro to do it, or so-and-so bros around. And, you know, like, but so all that to be said is, being a woman, queer identified person in the space has its own challenges, but, you know, maybe there's always challenges anyways, because it's human beings as well, you know, and egos. Doesn't really matter what you identify with. I've had the same thing with queer people, You know, it goes all around. You know, it goes all around. So I just don't want to pigeonhole. It's these dudes. It's everyone. You know, and how does that?
And to your point, you know, I think it really speaks to kind of the predominant culture of the industry as a whole, right? Which is why I think these kinds of conversations are really important, where we're talking about shifting that culture and softening and having a different power, like challenging those power dynamics, not only with the other people on set, but with the folks who are in front of the camera with whom we're collaborating, right? So that everybody kind of gets to show up with their full humanity, you know, and their best selves. Yeah, absolutely. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because you know, it's certainly something I've experienced, and I'm sure that everybody here has experienced that to some degree. So I'm glad that we're able to, you know, be in community with each other to help shift that norm.
It's a real thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I will say this before, and I like what Lois said before me. I'm sorry if I say your name. Men, I know you just went through the whole thing before it. All right. Usually, like, I just had a Zoom call with a client a couple of days ago that I'm shooting this week in my studio for a label, and we had a Zoom, and we had a whole conversation about we're coming together. And it's a guy, like a well-known dude, and like how we come together and bring our best selves and whatever that is going to be. And he was like, I'm into it. Yes, whatever. I am there to do what you want me to do, you know? And that feels good. Like, I was his first choice amongst this other roster. And like, to be a woman, to be chosen by this dude, like, you know, I think we bring something to the table of being who we are and our stories and our past. And we like, for me anyways, I don't come into a photo shoot with like this chip on my shoulder, like, do you know who I am? Like, I'm blah, 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 you know, like I come in like with my experiences of my life, and I'm like, let's do it. Let's make something amazing for the both of us. You know?
Absolutely. Well, and I appreciate, you know, to sort of jump off what you were just saying, and I would love to hear from other folks on the panel about this as well. How do you all feel about the way your really intersectional identities shift the way that you navigate making work and the industry? And so, you know, for everybody listening, when we say intersectionality, we mean, you know, someone who has many different pieces of their identity coming together, right? So you might be an immigrant, you might also be queer, right? That's intersectionality. And so being able to hold those things sort of all at the same time and be able to show up as your whole selves when you're making work.
I'll let Mong go this time first, and I'll bounce off of them.
I'm just thinking about the question. I guess, yeah, we are kind of always bringing different fragments together when we show up. Like, we don't only show up like, oh, today my queer self is out, tomorrow my self is out. So I think it's, I guess, like, going back to like the self-empowering part, I feel like before, when I was a little bit more self-conscious about myself, like I feel like when I show up to a place, I would kind of shrink myself. But after, I think I've been doing a lot of like self-work, just like really getting to know myself and like trying to look at myself in a way that's empowering, just as when I show up to my friends, show up to my loved ones. But I would say, like, I think coming out as queer, like, it's interesting for me, like my professional life, even though it starts before my coming out project, but I think it really took off more and more after I openly shared my identity. And I now really bring that to all the work I do. I hope people who reach out wanting to collaborate with me also want to collaborate with me, not just for my skill, but also for who I am. I think there are so many great photographers, but everyone comes in with different experiences, different way of seeing, that has so much to do with what we've been through. And I did have many occasions when I've been called to, say, photograph a queer community or photograph like migrant community, people will tell me like they were not expecting someone like me to show up, and they're really glad to have someone who actually shares similar experiences, who can relate in a very visceral way of what they are going through and take time to document their stories. And I don't take that like for granted. I think photography is really a trusting game. Like if you don't establish that trust, it will show up in the photos. And also, I think there's something about visibility that we don't talk about enough. Like when we say like, oh, we want more queer stories to be visible, but what's the power of being invisible? Who can choose to be invisible? I think about that often. So I think also allowing time for us, for other marginalized folks to rest, because I would say like showing up to a photo shoot is also work. Like we when we're in like a photo shoot, like we need to like really bring up the energy for both photographers and people who are showing up in front of camera. So I think just like, yeah, be more compassionate in all different situations. And I also want to comment on the pigeonhole issue that I definitely I'm still in conversation with myself regarding that. At the beginning, I really wanted to not be pigeonholed to only do like queer stories or immigrant stories. And I would just want to share like, oh, I can do this and that and this and that. But I think gradually after a couple of years of working, I realized I show up the best to photograph stories that I really care about. And even though I am gonna show up to all different stories in the same way, but there's nothing wrong to be focusing on like topics of our like most cared for topics. Like for me, it's definitely like about these diaspora queer stories. So yeah, I think like all these things, we don't need to go like super binary, like we only do this or only do that. So I guess like going back to, it's just like about how can we hone our own skills and really get to know ourselves, so that when we show up to document other people's, they will also feel the energy that we are transmitting to them too.
Absolutely. Well, and it's so important to, as you mentioned, to be able to rest and fill your cup, so you're able to like bring like the energy that you want to bring to really create a safe, inclusive container for whoever it is that you're photographing, which is so beautiful to be able to give that gesture of care to yourself first and then someone else. So thank you. Would anybody else like to respond?
Yeah, I relate a lot to just like the sentiment of like being pigeonholed to certain types of stories or certain types of like identifiers, or the way that, you know, for at least is like a photographer with like my intersecting identities, like what it means, at least for Hmong and I too, to be like reached out during like Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and then you get reached out during Pride Month, and then for myself, like Native Heritage Month. So it just becomes this thing of like really seeing when your workflow, you get like a lot of commissions at certain times, and you're like, and for like Queer the Lens, or for a lot of like queer artists and photographers out here really understand that during Pride Month. And so just like, how do we shift that? For myself, at least, I get really thankful when I get to take on projects that are so worthwhile, where I do get to like delve into topics or like community lived experiences of mine and my loved ones, like any time of the year, but I get to do stuff that's like to the scale that honors that. But for myself, I guess, in thinking about those lived experiences and how that impacts like my photo practice or my experiences in this field, is it informs a lot of the ways that I look at beauty and how I show beauty as a storyteller, as an image maker. Something that is like, and it's interesting because Hmong's actually photographed this friend, but I had this conversation with this friend of mine in New York, And she was just talking for herself as like a trans woman about how dysphoric she was and how people photographed her and how she'd see all these different photos from just event photographers in like, it was like outside of New York, but just seeing like for these like cis male photographers that were in the space that were taking photos of her at the event and her like trans sisters, and just the ways that she just felt like so she just felt like the person couldn't capture the way that not only she sees herself, but how she sees her trans sisters. And she, a thing she brought up that I think a lot about in conversations I'd had with my wife, who's also trans, is my wife told me that the images that I make, seeing them afterwards has been the images she's felt the most beautiful in. And the images where she's like really changed her perception of herself after viewing them. And that's the most rewarding experience as a visual storyteller. But something that the friend that was critiquing this to me, like critiquing these other photographers that have photographed her, was she said, it's really telling when you see an image like that taken of you, because it really sees like who are the people that are close to them. If there are no trans people close to them that they find beautiful, how are they going to photograph trans people where they feel beautiful? Because if they're not like viewing like queer bodies, trans bodies, like intersex bodies, two-spirit bodies, anybody that you know, historically hasn't been shown in the light and beauty and joy that we like experience ours as, then how are they going to make a good photograph? And how are they going to make a photograph that someone feels just like they like radiate what they radiate to their friends? And so I think that conversation with her, because she was asking me to like make an image of her, which we haven't been able to yet, but that'll be like the biggest dream of mine to gift her that. But that just really made me rethink like why I make images and why I'm making images with the people like in my life, and the not even just the people in my life, but for different commission projects or different projects where I'm like working with other people that have shared lived experiences.
Absolutely. Well, and to make someone feel seen in that way is such an incredible gift to give to that person. So I really appreciate you both sharing. I do want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, and we have some really excellent questions coming in. So if it's okay with y'all, we'll shift to hear from the audience. Is that cool with everybody? Okay, great. So the first question is that they're curious when each of you chose to come out to your clients, and an example of how you did that, if you would like to share.
I'll say something about that.
Go for it.
It's not, to be honest, it's not the first thing on my to-do list is to say, hey, so-and-so, I'm a lesbian. Let's shoot together. You know, like I'm a photographer. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, yes, I'm queer, I'm a woman, I'm a photographer, but bottom line is I'm a creative person and I show up as a creative person. And if that gets, and because of who I am, that comes out. I don't have to give a detailed resume of my sexuality to my, people I photograph. That being said though, like when I do shoot the queer community, it is more of a comfortable environment, them knowing that I am a queer person myself, for sure. But like my main clientele, like in the music industry, advertising, editorial, I mean, obviously when I walk into a room, I don't look like a little femme coming in with my high heels, you know what I mean? Like I have this masculine energy that probably like ding ding, like sure, she's a queer woman, but I don't ever feel the need to explain that to anybody before I start photographing. Do you know what I mean? Like this is who I am, and take it or leave it, but I've never had a problem I've never had an issue with that. It's always been about, honestly, like if I'm a woman or not, you know, like, but it's never been about my sexuality.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Would anybody else like to respond?
Yeah, I also don't really, if it doesn't come up, I don't directly say it, but I guess like my presence is just very gay. I don't know, I feel like sometimes it's, yeah, I don't try to hide it. And also depends on what situations, if it's like personal projects or like longer term projects, or if we're collaborating in very close ways, then at some point it will show up, like this will come up as a topic, but it's not like, yeah, it's not like I go there and I'm like, I am queer. But I also don't like, I think it's just like a straight person wouldn't come up to you like, I'm straight, like it's so why do we need to bring that up? But at the same time, I think the important thing is like, I don't feel ashamed about it. I don't feel like if someone don't accept me as queer to be on a job, then that's not the people I want to work with anyway. So yeah.
Absolutely. Coyote, you're nodding. Do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I don't know, it's so complicated. Because for myself, I feel like my presentation is always different. I don't know, as like a trans person who is pretty clockable at times, like, which is complicated. We're thinking about in questions like that, how does like passability come into that? How does like different like privileges in space? And for myself, like, I don't only work behind the camera, I also work in front of the camera. And so most of the time that I feel like I have to like disclose like aspects of my identity or my like trans experience or gender experience, like does come into like me being on set and working with people where like, because I don't, it is not comfortable for me to be misgendered the entire set. So like time on set. So those are conversations that I'll like try to have if that's coming up. And for a lot of my friends that are queer, specifically genderqueer, and like, you know, gender expansive folks that are models or different things like that, they'll talk about disclosing or having conversations about their identity so that they're respected in space, and then still not being met with that respect. So it is a really complicated experience on my end. So I feel like, I don't know, at the same time, I don't feel like I ever am coming out necessarily. I think it's more of like having conversations as a means of understanding and respect when you like want someone to be better about pronouns, to be better with the way that they refer to you or treat your body in space, or and I think like for myself, when I enter certain work environments, that's like, I'm very open in all different kinds of spaces about my gender, sexuality, my queerness. However, when you're on large sets, like not everyone that's like the like camera assistant or the, you know, that are gonna like know you coming in fully.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is a really complicated thing, especially in larger productions, you know, which I think begets a larger like a larger conversation that, you know, we at Queer the Lens have started having, and that we're really excited to continue having on kind of an industry level, is like, how can we restructure our best practices in productions to reduce the labor on anyone from a marginalized community coming into that space to be able to show up as their full selves, right? So like when I do productions, everybody has their pronoun on the call sheet, including everybody on crew, in front of the camera, across the board, right? So it's just sort of like a standard operating procedure, you know, little things like that, I think reduce the level of labor that has to be done to really create a truly inclusive space. So thank you for sharing. That was really great. We have another question. How do you navigate building queer community, both in your work and in your personal lives? which has gotten extra hard during pandemic.
I can go. I guess I started building community from pretty early on, especially after I moved to New York. I feel very grateful to be in a space like New York. I know that's not the case for a lot of other places. But when I first moved to New York, there were so many queer organizing collectives, and I just actively went to look for those spaces, and then just keep showing up to things I'm curious about. And after a while, you just gradually start to know people, and people start to recognize you. So it's a very long-term relationship building. And I do feel like after pandemic, it has become harder. But I would still say, I think people who want to connect will show up to connect. And I think it's a very, like, you have to be very patient. It's not like, oh, I want to build a community and the next day you have a community. But I think it's really about like how you show up for yourself and how you show up for others. And how do you create your space. Like, I think it's a little sad at the beginning, like when we're like in photo industry, we don't have a community. And then when we're like outside in our personal space, we don't have a community. But that also gave me a lot of fuel to actively look for those places. And I also organized with folks whose value I align with. So for in the photo industry, I work with Authority Collective and Women Photograph. And just again, like by participating in these spaces, gradually people who align with you will show up. But it's just a really long process of making friends. It's kind of like all the other ways of you make friends, but just be a little bit more targeted, I guess.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I want to make sure that we are reminding time. And so there's one more question that's a response actually to what you were sharing, Coyote. And so this person is a femme, gender fluid, gender queer, BIPOC artist. And coming out is kind of one of the first things that does come up because people assume that they are a woman. They said that they're kind of forced to come out, and they're not sure how to approach that because it puts a spotlight on them that can go kind of one of either two ways. So they resonated a lot with what you said. And they want to know how you can cope with not receiving the respect, say if you're misgendered, stuff like that. How do you choose to address that in the moment?
I feel like biggest thing on set or in work environments is knowing that you should not and do not have to be the only person that advocates for yourself. Like for me, like in a moment where I was being like misgendered on like set, and like it was like for a film shoot that like my wife was directing, and it was just someone who was like just filling in that day. My like wife like took them aside and kind of like had that conversation and be like, hey, like some people are like uncomfortable like on set around pronouns, like can you like, you know. And also a big thing too to kind of avoid that for people that are creating those work environments is just really it makes such a difference just in the beginning of like your like crew work environment, is to just like have people introduce themselves, just have everyone gather and be like, hey, thank you everyone for, you know, getting here like on time. Like, let's just do a quick go around. I always do that for events I organize because I do like trans and queer nightlife dance events. And so all of my performers, I'll kind of like have everyone introduce themselves and say how they want to be like acknowledged in space. But really, yeah, like even if it's just having conversation with one person on set that you like trust and feel comfortable with, to like, you know, just be like, hey, like, you know, if you want someone to have that conversation, but if you're in a space where you're the only person, you know, it really feels very debilitating and like heavy to have to keep like going through the motions of, you know, working through like speaking, like having your truth be understood by people that do project assumptions onto you. So I feel like a lot of it sometimes too is really creating like our own, like, you know, like mental and emotional protection barriers. I don't know if like Hmong has this too in terms of being in environments where you're like, I know at the end of the day, the people that know me really know me and truly see and understand me. And those are the people that at the end of like a work day, I know I'll feel so recharged and rejuvenated by, but also that like I don't have to go through these like conversations of like really fighting to be known or really you know, having to go through this very arduous process of like kind of like feeling like you're advocating for yourself constantly just to have like something as simple as being respected in space. And this kind of goes back to the question that was asked, like, how do we build community and everything, or how have we built community? I think a lot of that really comes to like, who are the people surrounding us that we don't have to explain ourselves to, that we like truly can just like, you know, share a moment with and feel seen and known beyond like language and beyond our like physical presentations, you know?
Absolutely. That's really great. Thank you so much for responding to that person, Coyote. I appreciate you. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add before we wrap up? We're a few minutes over the hour mark. So I want to give you the floor for anything you'd like to add before we go. Oh, all good. And thank you all so much for your care and generosity in being here today. I'm really, you know, I speak for all of us when I say that I'm really appreciative for your work and your candor and how vulnerable you've been in sharing your experiences. And it's these kinds of conversations that give me hope about the future of our industry and the work, and you know who you each are as people is really inspiring. So I am really grateful for all of your care and attention. Thank you. And the chat is popping off with other people sharing that sentiment. So thank you all for being here to listen to our amazing panelists. Again, I'm Kate Warren with Queer the Lens. You can find us at queerthelens.com and at Queer the Lens on Instagram. I want to thank our amazing partners at American Photographic Artists. And if you would like to get involved, everyone, regardless of who you are, you can follow us on Instagram. You can sign up for our email list to stay in the know. You can help spread the word about our survey. We are really starting our organization from a place of listening. So we really are eager to hear from the queer community about what kind of support you need and want from an organization that is here to serve and add benefit to you in your career. And you can hire LGBTQIA folks on your jobs and assignments, and not just during Pride Month, all year round. And for queer folks, you can take that survey and let us know all of your deepest heart's desires. We are here to serve you. And tell your queer friends and chosen families about us as well. If you're interested in getting involved with the organization, you can reach out to us directly. And through these fine contact information. And we really appreciate everybody being here, spending your Monday nights and afternoons with us. Thank you all so very much. And if you have further questions, feel free to get in touch, and we are happy to help facilitate any troubleshooting or questions you might have about navigating the industry.